Let's see. You got it now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So the photograph on the far, there it says original photograph. That's the photograph that was taken from Marsden Road.
Oh,
And then you can see that I went in there and digitally recreated a tree in there, which was a much better kind of a specimen, and then turned that into that black and white digital shot that you guys are working on. And so, what the main focus that we're talking about, or will be in this part, which is the how to do sky and the tree, is how do you mix the colors and getting the temperature right and value. So I'll just talk about each one of those. So this is all on the mixing green, and we talked about mixing, cold and warm greens.
Welcome to the series on mixing green. All landscape artists know that there are times when the landscape is confusing with green on green on green. We're going to work through the green chart here using 3 yellows and 2 different blues with the purpose of building up your color mixing library so that you can refer to that in the future. Feel free to use these colors or your own shades of yellow and blue. To avoid some confusion, let's just clear this up now because green is a cool color. How could it be warm? So talking about a warm green, we're talking about a comparison or relative color. We create the warm green by adding more yellow and the cool by adding more blue. And the shade of green will depend on the original source of blue and yellow. Okay, back to our color mixing. You may want to pause the video here to get the actual list of colors. However, you can use whatever yellows and blues you have in your painting kit. As we go through this chart, what we're capturing is the warm color, the neutral color or medium color, and the cool color. You'll notice that the cool color is not showing up very well due to the film lighting, but you'll get another clear shot of it in a few minutes. The application is definitely in nature where sunlight hitting a surface warms it up, leaving the shadows to be a much cooler color. So having warm and cool on your palette is very important to capture the scene and make it look realistic. Using the same yellows, we're now pulling out phthalo blue, which is a very heavy pigmented color. It requires a lot less blue to really dramatically affect the color, and the color itself is more vibrant. The big difference between the phthalo and the ultramarine blue is ultramarine blue has red in it, the complementary color of green, therefore it neutralizes the green and makes it duller. Having done your chart, as soon as you start to see a scene, you immediately start to notice the cool and warm colors. The artist suddenly describes the scene as being a highly saturated phthalo warm green in the foreground with a desaturated blue green in the background. And in this early morning scene, the distant mountains have actually turned a purple color. And here, the left side of the screen is a very saturated, warm color. Well, on the right, it is a very desaturated, cool color. Looking at colors in warm and cool colors solves the green on green problem. Hope you enjoyed.
So then what you end up with when you're painting the tree or any kind of green, it's a cool side versus the warm side.
Right.
And no matter what color the green is, even if it was kind of a bluish green tree, when the light hits it, it's going to warm it up. Now, it might warm it up to like a more bluish warm color, but it will definitely be when the light hits it. So therefore, it's not value. In other words, it's not taking your paint and making it darker for the other side of the tree. It's taking your paint and making it colder for the other side of the tree. And then you can make that darker if it needs to be. So on our mixing blue, we've got a wide variety of blues, and it's all because of sky color. And again, I got a little video to show you here. You can see the blue on the horizon is often like quite light.
Mm-hmm.
And then as it goes up, it gets bluer and bluer until it's a shockingly dark blue if you're looking straight up. Often with your camera, it's almost impossible to get that shot. The camera will lighten it. I just happen to somehow catch that with my iPhone. But our sky colors really vary greatly. And often it's not only different shades of blue, but it's actually becomes different shades of gray. And the gray themselves, you can get a warm and a cool gray. So the top left-hand picture, the sky looks, where you can see the sky there, it looks very much like a light cerulean kind of a color. And the clouds themselves actually have kind of a warm yellowy tint to it, where in the bottom scene, it's quite blue and cold. And so part of it might be looking blue because of the reflection of the sun hitting that distant mountain, turning it red. So it's, again, colors change in relationship to each other. So that's why we got into, mixing, learn again how to mix black. And we mentioned in the class that all complementary colors make black. So we said on the Quiller chart, it actually named the colors. So if you hold them opposite each other, you can see cadmium orange and ultramarine blue are right opposite of each other. So together they make black. The black that's shown there is actually the color, but actually if you're mixing it, you'll be surprised how brown it actually looks. And as you mix all those colors, what you'll find is you may look at a color that you're mixing and think it doesn't look gray because maybe you're mixing it on a white surface or whatever, but you put that onto the canvas and believe me, everything that's a complementary color will look black. But because you're using a warm color and a cool color to do it, it's very easy to warm the color up. And down below, when we get into the scale, because we're only adding white to the color, those then become tints. So we've got the value scale from 1 to 9, and we've got a whole source of different warms, and then below it, cool colors. When you're, say, making clouds or you're mixing color, instead of taking like the source pile or the black and putting it into your white, you can actually mix the value first. So you can turn around, start your cool colors, mix it down till it's like a 7, and then take that 7 and then add it to whatever color you're going to put it in. Even if you're putting it in to white, which will make it lighter, you can keep on mixing in the 5, 6, 7 and put it in, versus every time having to go back right to the original source pile. So you get it to a shade or a tone that you like, and then you put it in. And what you'll find is, if it's a cloud, if it's the same, like if it's cloudy and dark, and let's say it's at a value of 7, even that, when the light hits it, it will be a warm 7 versus a cool 7. So you can see the white and cool at 7 are the exact same value, but one's warm and one's cool. So you can still keep it dark and you just warm it up, and it will give a whole different impression in the piece. When you mix it and you're looking at the pile, it may look a little brown. When you take your palette knife and scrape, the underlying color will come up. So it'll either show blue or orange, or it'll show charcoal. But if you get it to a charcoal color, you look back, your source pile may still look a little brown. And so what you've done, once I do that, I know I've got the pile I want. I add white, then I know it's charcoal. And then I go back and I remix, but you could actually do that pile, separate it, put more orange in one and then more blue in the other. And then you end up with a cold and a warm color. And I'm going to go back up in here. And what you have to do is when you're painting and looking at a scene or a sky, you're looking at it and you're making a judgment that says, how have I got warm colors in there and what color are they? Or what, it's more or less what color do you want them to be? We're not painting, photographs. We're mixing paint. So we have to use the paints we have and get the colors we want. But you are going to make a decision that says, there's a lot of red in this sky. So I can look through my list and I can see one of my blacks uses red. And then I can get at that little pinky look. And this has a real bluish tinge to it, bluish red. So that to me looks like ultramarine blue. And so now I know. And now I'm pretty sure I'm going to be using a variation of orange in the painting. So all of a sudden it's ultramarine blue, it's cadmium orange, and this is going to be made up of ultramarine blue and yellows. So I'm more or less unifying my painting. This one, and then if I can, I'm going to go find that video and show it to you in another format if I can. But so what we did then in class, we talked about, or you're doing now, is you're going to get a transparent color and you're going to tint your background. And I haven't taped this off, worried about making it nice and clean at the end. I'm just tinting it. And in this case, I've just used one color to tint. In class, I did a more advanced tint. And I'm using a rag to wipe off where I want it to be light. So I know for my giclée, or just looking at the photograph, that this is the clouds and the sky generally is lighter, and then a little bit of water. And then I'm just tinting everything, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm leaving it a little bit thicker where it's darker. Then you're going into your painting. Now, this is a variation of the full painting in which I actually did paint this, but on your current one, you're just doing the sky and the tree. And then what you're doing is you're going to come up with a strategy if you're underpainting. And your strategy could be red, and it could be a lighter red on one side and a darker red, or this looks like it's got more of a bluish tinge in it. And this is a combination of a yellow and an orange, and then just a little tiny bit of blue in it to turn it a little bit brown. And there's the underpainting. And then you're taking out your whatever greens you're going to use, and you're mixing it. And I'm deciding that the light is coming down from this direction. So yeah, it's going to hit the top of the tree. And no matter what, it's lighter at the top than it is at the bottom. So it doesn't matter what conditions you're painting a tree, and that's always the way. So you're trying to manage your color from top to bottom and from left to right. So you can see that there's some colors in here that really, they drop off and they aren't used anymore as you get down to the bottom. And then I'm making sure I've got a dark bottom to ground the tree, to sink the tree. In some paintings, the tree will be on the ground, but it almost looks like it's floating a little bit. And that's typically because it's not been grounded. And I'm modifying the design a little bit with this swooping shape here, because later I'm going to kind of bring the trees to bring you back in, the rocks in this line to get you back into the trees. So is everybody
Patrick,
okay?
are you using the orange and the blue for those dark areas at the base of that tree? Is that the black, the dark? That's the cadmium orange and the phthalo blue?
That's the black that I've mixed in there, and I would be putting that in. If it's not, what I would have done is I've got my green and I'm just adding more and more blue in it until it goes black.
Okay.
Okay. And this is a photograph, and it's always blacker than it actually is. So you can actually, this tree trunk in there is actually a little bit brownish in my actual piece. So it's a little bit, it's not that black in my, and this is not that dark in the actual piece. So every time you do a photograph, it darkens up. And then the chalk was a discussion that said, when you look at it can be either to put in a reminder that you may want to remember, hey, the clouds are going to go this way and I'm going to bring them through the trees. But it can be in reshaping your design. So you can literally eliminate things, you can cut them off, make them shorter, and or you can actually go in there and say, I'm going to make this much longer and bring it out. And you can watch, make sure that you haven't got like a straight line of a branch coming this way, and then the straight line of the mountain coming into it. You want it to be above it or below it. And you're just looking at your lines. You're putting your chalk on, and you're not even thinking about the chalk again. You're just going to paint, and that chalk will get incorporated right into the painting. And at the end of the painting, when the painting is dry, if there's any chalk, a little bit of water on a rag will take it off. If you have a bright green and you want to turn it to turn it so it's not as bright, add green. So any color you have on the color wheel, if you wanted to dull the color, or they use the word gray the color, you can add the complementary color. So
Right,
just
yeah.
as ultramarine blue, if ultramarine blue on its own in a painting is really harsh, just put a little tiny bit of cadmium orange in it. It grays it.
Okay.
So that I have many color wheels. I have a little color wheel. I even take it with me, so that I'm out in the field painting, and I suddenly get a mind meltdown. I'm thinking to myself, what color is that? But a color wheel is pretty useful for mixing, because it says if I take it red and I put it into blue, it's going to make that color purple. Or if I take yellow, and I'm not sure if you can see that, but I take yellow and I put it into
Add blue.
and then there are all the different tones, etc., that you can make. It also shows you on the line if you're getting a color palette of primary or secondary color, or complementary colors, or tertiary color, or triads, or mixing. So it shows you colors that go well together. So if you read a color wheel, it's got a ton of color hints and painting hints on it. So
Can you
that's
show
like you
that
said-
to us? Like next class, can you show us that color wheel, that particular one?
the Quiller wheel.
Yeah, that's the Quiller wheel.
No,
'cause you
no, the
showed
one
us-
you were just showing.
the one
Pat.
you were just showing us just then.
Okay, this is kind of a generic wheel you can buy in any art store. In town, they used to sell both this wheel and the Quiller wheel, and you can get it in a very large format like this, in a very small format. And it's designed so that on here, it's showing you, this is like suggested color palettes that work. So you can have a color palette that's using two primary colors. So if again you go over here and you're pointing to the orange here, this line is pointing exactly to the blue. Now it doesn't name them, but it says if you wanted to paint a painting that's done mainly in primary colors, and you got a lot of orange in it, then your primary color is blue. Then you've got a split primary. Unfortunately, it's kind of the same term we use when we say in your paints bring 2 yellows, 2 blues, 2 red. We'll say that's a split primary. But what this one means is a split primary used in this meaning. It means if you're using orange here and you want to have a split primary, don't pick the blue, pick the two colors on either side. That's a split primary. So, and it explains, tints, tones, and values. And the big difference here between what I would argue versus other groups was, it says add gray or add black to get either a shade or a tint. What I'm saying is mix your black, make your gray, and then add it back in. So if I've got a split primary of orange and blue, then I've mixed my black out of orange and blue, and I've mixed my gray, and I can make it warm or cool. versus if I just go and I buy a tube of black paint, inside the paint, it may have a tendency towards red, and you put it in your green and it kills your green. So if you are going to use black, make absolutely sure that you understand what the tendency of that black is, because you don't want to inadvertently be using it and dull all your colors back.
So if you're using it for black between trees and the colors that way, you would want to use orange and blue for making your blacks.
I make the first decision that says, what did I use to make my green?
Hmm.
So if I use phthalo, it would be, then I'm going to use phthalo green and phthalo blue, and I believe it's cadmium red medium.
Hmm. Okay.
And just going back to Heather's comment, like mixing blacks isn't easy. Like doing those to the ultramarine blue and the cadmium orange, it's not easy. But just get a separate piece of white paper,
That I figured out.
and when you think you've got it, scrape it on that thing. It will show an underlying color of either blue or orange, and you just know now to put the opposite color in. The beauty of using single pigment paints, you just one or the other. Okay, so if you guys, I'm not trying to cut it off. I just want to summarize. If you guys can go ahead and do those exercises for next week, bring them all in, and or if you can't finish them, bring them in. We'll finish anything you didn't do in class. But after that, the following week, you're not doing any kind of mixing of paints. We're only going to be doing the how to paint rocks and how to paint sky. Rocks and water. The good news is we're going to use the grays that you've already mixed. And water is typically a darker version of the sky color. So that's what it is. We'll use the sky color and a darker version to make the water. So you don't have to mix the blue again. And you don't have to mix your grays.
That's assuming we can mix them consistently from one week to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even get it the first time.
And you know what? I was thinking, I painted these today, and I was thinking, one thing I may not have shown you was first of all, there is a gray scale on this piece here, and that's the lighter gray scale, and that's the darker gray scale. So it's when we added white, we added color, we added white for the blues, we were tinting it. We weren't changing the color though, we're just taking the color and lightening it. So in the paint, just going back to that beginning, we said, you got to get your you get your color right. Then you got to understand whether you need to have it warmer or cool. And then you got to get the value right. And if you're making it lighter, you're tinting it lighter. When you tint or getting your value right, you're not changing your color. You're making the color lighter or you're making the color darker, but you're not changing the color. Where it becomes tough, it's easy in dark blue. Like if you have dark phthalo blue, it's going to be like up in that dark scale, and you just keep adding white to it, and it will be light blue right down. Where it's difficult to understand is you open up your tin of yellow, and your yellow is here. It's not dark. So if your yellow is here, then it's easy to do these guys. You just add white. But yellow here, to get it darker, you pretty well have to add the complementary color to it. And as you add the complementary color, which is purple, it will get darker and darker and darker. But by the time it's here, it's black. And here, it's not going to be yellow anymore. And this will barely be yellow, then it's yellow. That's a tough one to kind of understand, where a dark color, you add white, and your value just keeps getting lighter. And when you're a lighter color, you eventually lose the color. So value, they say, doesn't change color. But of course, as you get darker, you actually have to. That's for another day, another lesson. But getting your when you're doing a tree, getting the warm and cool colors is an advanced concept. And remember, on that little in our painting, not only are we going to eventually paint the foreground tree, we got trees across the shoreline at the back we've got to paint as well. So we'll have to decide again, are any of those warm and are they saturated or desaturated? You saw in that, you might have seen that video. Desaturated is taking a color out of the tube and putting any other color in it. So you're changing or diluting the color. But when it becomes distant, you can make it whiter or lighter and bluer.
Mhm.
So as it goes to the distance, you can make it lighter and bluer, and that will push it back. And so remember now, you're getting your warm and cold colors in the foreground, and you're going to have to get desaturated warm and cool colors in the background later on. And that's all I had to say for tonight.